She was the most photographed woman in the world, and she was terrified. Not of cameras, not of crowds, not of the palace that had swallowed her whole. She was terrified that she was performing a life instead of living one, that every smile was rehearsed, that every gesture was calculated, that somewhere underneath the image, the actual person had gone very quiet and very still and was waiting for someone to notice. And the only person who seemed to understand that, the only person who had ever done the same thing and survived it, was a woman she had never met. A woman who had been dead for 2 years by the time Diana finally said her name out loud. What happened when those two worlds collided? One woman still living, one woman already gone, changed how a princess decided to save herself. London, Kensington Palace, a private sitting room on the 2nd floor. Spring, 1991, Tuesday afternoon. The light coming through tall windows is soft, gray, English, rain against the glass. Diana sits alone, not the Diana the world sees, not the Diana of state dinners and charity galas and carefully composed smiles. Just Diana. 29 years old, thin, hair pulled back, no makeup. She is holding a book in her lap, not reading it, just holding it. The title visible on the cover. Audrey Hepburn, An Elegant Spirit. Pages marked with small paper notes. She has read it before, more than once. She puts it down, looks at the window. Rain traces lines down the glass. Outside, the gardens of Kensington are green and wet and empty. Inside, the palace is full of people who do not see her. Staff who look past her. Protection officers who watch her without watching. A marriage that had become a careful arrangement of public appearances and private silences. A life that looked perfect from the outside and felt like a cage from the inside. She has smiled through dinners where no one asked how she was. Has walked through rooms where everyone watched and no one noticed. She picks the book up again, turns to a page she has marked. A photograph of Audrey sitting on a dirt floor in Mekele, holding a starving child. No makeup, no Givenchy, no performance, just a woman with the full weight of her attention on one child who needed her. Her eyes are not looking at the camera, they are looking at the child, only the child. Diana stares at the photograph for a long time. She stopped performing, Diana says, to no one, to herself, to the photograph. She just stopped. This is the moment, not the moment they met. They never met. Diana, Princess of Wales, and Audrey Hepburn never sat in the same room, never held the same conversation, never touched hands. The encounter that changed Diana's life was not between two living women. It was between a young princess drowning in performance and the documented life of a woman who had found a way out. To understand why Audrey's story reached Diana so deeply, why it reached her in a way that nothing else had, you have to understand where both women began. Audrey Kathleen Rustin, born May 4th, 1929. Ixelles, Brussels. Father left when she was 6. War came when she was 10. Arnhem, Netherlands, under Nazi occupation. 5 years of starvation, silence, fear. A child who learned that the only safe response to danger was to be pleasing, be small, be graceful, be exactly what the situation required. Survive by becoming whatever they needed you to be. Diana Frances Spencer, born July 1st, 1961. Sandringham, Norfolk. Parents divorced when she was 6. Childhood fractured by absence and the peculiar loneliness of English aristocracy. A father who remarried, a mother who left, a world that expected her to be fine, A girl who learned that the only safe response to instability was to be pleasing, be beautiful, be charming, be exactly what the situation required, survive by becoming whatever they needed you to be. Different decades, different countries, different circumstances, the same lesson, the same wound, the same survival strategy, and the same cost. For Audrey, the cost was visible in early Hollywood. Roman Holiday, 1953. She is 23 years old, already performing, already managing the gap between who she is and who she is supposed to be. The gamine, the waif, the new kind of beauty. The image crystallizes fast, too fast. By the time she wins the Oscar, she is already something the industry has decided she is: an icon, an image, a brand, not a person, never quite a person. For Diana, the cost was visible from the beginning. The engagement in 1981, when she was 19 years old. The wedding watched by 750 million people. The fairy tale that the world needed and she was asked to inhabit. She was not consulted about the fairy tale. Nobody asked if she wanted to be Cinderella. The glass slipper was placed on her foot and the story was written. She was not a person. She was a symbol. And nobody had told her how exhausting it is to be a symbol 24 hours a day. But here is where the two stories diverge. Here is where Audrey's path becomes the thing Diana is reading in that sitting room in Kensington in 1991. Audrey found Givenchy, found a relationship that saw her not as the image, but as the person. Found work she believed in. Found, eventually, UNICEF. Found a way to redirect the attention the world insisted on giving her, to point it at something that mattered more than her own image. She did not escape the performance entirely. Nobody does. But she found something real inside it, something true, something that let her look in the mirror and recognize herself. Diana is reading about that journey. 30 years old. She does not recognize herself in any mirror, in any palace, in any country. She recognizes herself in the photograph of Audrey sitting on that dirt floor in Ethiopia. In the woman who stopped asking for permission to be human. The biography was given to her by a friend, a real friend. Someone who knew Diana before the title, before the wedding, before the transformation into symbol. "Read this," the friend had said. "I think you'll understand something." Diana had set it aside. Then one night, an evening when Charles was away and the boys were asleep, and the silence had that particular quality it gets when you are alone with a life you did not choose, she picked it up. She read it in 3 nights. The page about Audrey's childhood in Arnhem, the war, the hunger, the father's absence. Diana read that page 4 times, not to compare suffering, but because she recognized the mechanism, the way a child builds a self out of what is required, the way survival becomes performance, becomes identity, becomes the only thing you know how to do. She read about Audrey's first marriage, Mel Fay Ryer, 1954 to 1968, 14 years. A marriage that began with love and slowly became something more controlled, more diminishing. A husband who decided what she wore, who she could see, what projects she could take, who was threatened by her talent and expressed that threat through careful control. Audrey stayed for 14 years because she did not know she was allowed to leave. Diana read that passage and set the book down and looked at the ceiling for a long time. She picked it up again. Read about 1967? Audrey stepping away from Hollywood, choosing for the first time to live rather than to perform. because she had finally understood that the image was not the person and the performance was not the life, and she was allowed to want something real. Diana felt something she had not felt in a long time. Permission, not from Charles or the palace or the press, permission from a woman already gone. From evidence, documented, photographed, real, that it was possible to be famous and human at the same time. She went to her desk and wrote. She turned her visibility into a weapon for children who had no visibility at all. That is not giving back. That is giving forward. That is using what they gave you whether you wanted it or not and pointing it somewhere true. She folded the paper, kept it. 3 months later, autumn 1991. Audrey's trail is already visible. UNICEF Special Ambassador since March 1988. Field trips accumulating year by year. Ethiopia, Turkey, Venezuela, Sudan, Bangladesh, Vietnam. Each one documented, each one photographed. Each one producing articles and interviews that find their way into newspapers around the world, into a sitting room in Kensington Palace, into the hands of a young woman who marks passages and tries to understand something she cannot yet name. Audrey keeps appearing. In every article about charity work Diana reads, Audrey's name surfaces eventually, as the standard, as the example, as the woman who understood what to do with visibility when the world refused to stop watching. A journalist publishes an interview with Audrey that autumn, not about films, about Ethiopia, about the orphanage in Mekele in 1988. 500 children, starving. The interview is quiet and specific. No rhetoric, no performance. Just Audrey describing what she saw and why she could not look away. I know what this is, she says. I was this child. Arnhem, 1944, 14 years old, eating tulip bulbs, watching people disappear. Someone helped me. Someone came. I do not have the right to pretend that did not happen. Diana reads it at her desk the morning it appears. She cuts it out, places it in the drawer with the folded notepaper she wrote 3 months earlier. She picks up the phone, calls a contact at the British Red Cross, an organization she has been quietly watching for months. Not to arrange a trip, not yet. Just to ask, I've been reading about Audrey Hepburn's work. Can you tell me more about how she started? What made her say yes? The contact tells her. Audrey sought UNICEF out herself, not simply approached and recruited, but asked. 58 years old, mostly retired, genuinely unsure whether she had anything to offer. She said yes because she saw photographs of children in Ethiopia and recognized something in them that she could not unknow. Diana hangs up, looks at the newspaper clipping, at Audrey's face, at the child in Audrey's arms. Something has shifted, something quiet and fundamental, the way a door shifts when someone turns a key, the lock not yet open, but moving. November 1991. A friend invites Diana to visit a center for homeless young people in London. Not an official visit, not a photo opportunity, just a Tuesday afternoon. Diana says yes, goes with one protection officer. No press, no cameras, no advance notice. She sits with young people who have nowhere to go. She does not perform. She listens. She asks questions. She is not there as Diana, Princess of Wales. She is there as a person who wanted to understand something. She comes home and writes in her private journal that this was the first time in years she felt real. Not performed. Real. She says she thought of Audrey the whole time, of the photographs from Ethiopia, of the way Audrey's attention in those photographs is total, undivided, not for the cameras, for the child. This is what Diana learns from Audrey. Not technique, not strategy, not how to manage a public image or navigate a media storm. Something simpler and more difficult. She learns that presence is possible, that the same visibility that feels like a prison can become a gift if you point it somewhere true, that the cameras following you everywhere, the eyes that never leave you, the global attention that has been the source of so much pain, all of that can be redirected. All of that weight can be given meaning. Audrey understood this, took years to understand it, made mistakes along the way, stayed in things too long, performed when she should have rested, but found, eventually, the thing that made the performance worthwhile. The starving children of Ethiopia gave her back to herself. They did not know they were doing it. They were just children who needed help. But in helping them, she remembered who she had always been underneath the icon. The 14-year-old girl from Arnhem. The child who survived, who owed a debt, who paid it. Diana is reading this, and she is 30 years old, and she is starting to understand something she cannot yet fully articulate. That she too owes a debt. Not to the monarchy, not to the public who put her on a pedestal and kept her there. To herself. To the girl before the fairy tale. The girl who existed before she became a symbol and who is still there somewhere, waiting, carrying the same wound that Audrey carried and surviving it the same way. By 1992, Diana has begun to move. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly. She visits hospitals without cameras. She sits with AIDS patients when the world still treats AIDS as a death sentence and a shame. She touches people, not the performative touch of official visits. Real touch, the kind that says, I see you. I am not afraid of you. You are not invisible to me. Audrey dies in January 1993. Diana reads the news early in the morning at Kensington Palace. She sits for a long time with the newspaper. The cause of death? Appendix cancer. A rare disease called pseudomyxomu perit-ni. Diagnosed just months earlier, after Audrey returned from her final UNICEF trip to Somalia in September 1992, which she had described as apocalyptic. She had called it the worst thing she had ever seen. She came home sick. The diagnosis came quickly. 4 months later, she was gone. Diana has never spoken to her, never been in the same room, but she writes a private note, addressed to no one, to Audrey. She writes, You showed me that the watching doesn't have to be the suffering. You showed me that you can take all of that, all of the eyes, all of the attention, all of the visibility they force on you, and give it to the people who need it most. You showed me it was possible to be real inside the impossible. I am going to try. She folds the note, keeps it. It is never made public. In 1997, Diana contacts the British Red Cross. Not to ask questions this time. To say yes. She wants to work on landmines. She wants to go to Angola. She wants to walk through minefields that have been cleared and hold the hands of people who lost limbs and point every camera that follows her everywhere toward this and say, Look, this is real. This matters. This is the thing worth seeing. She goes to Angola in January 1997. The photographs are extraordinary. Not because Diana is beautiful, though she is, because her attention is total. She is not performing. She is present. She is sitting with children who lost legs to landmines, completely, entirely there. In the photographs, you can see the difference between someone who is there for the cameras and someone who is there for the person. It is unmistakable. It is the same quality you see in the photographs of Audrey in Somalia in 1992. The same undivided attention. The same willingness to let the image collapse in favor of the truth. The world watches. The world is moved. Not by Diana's beauty, by Diana's humanity, by the gap between who she was supposed to be and who she actually was. By the evidence, visible to everyone, that underneath the fairy tale there was a real person who had decided to live a real life. She dies in August 1997. Paris, tunnel, 36 years old. Too soon, impossibly soon. The world breaks in the way it does when someone finally found their true self and then was taken before they could finish living it. At her funeral, hundreds of millions of people watch. The largest television audience in history at that point. They watch because they loved her. Because they had watched her for 16 years and knew her face the way you know someone you love. They watch because she was theirs, not the palaces, not the monarchies, not the presses. Theirs, the public's, the people's princess. But what they are watching, without knowing it, is the completion of something Audrey started. A line that runs from a phone call at 1 a.m. where a promise was made, through a sitting room in Kensington Palace in 1991, where a young woman read a biography and felt permission for the first time, all the way to a minefield in Angola in January 1997, where a princess stopped performing and started living. Audrey taught Diana that visibility is not the enemy, that the watching does not have to be the suffering, that you can take the thing they force on you, the attention, the image, the symbol they need you to be, and redirect it. Point it somewhere true. Give it to the people who have no visibility at all. Let them borrow your light. Diana did that, imperfectly, incompletely, with all the contradictions of a real human life. But she did it, and the reason she knew it was possible, the map she was following even when she could not explain it, was the documented life of a woman who had made the same crossing before her. Two women who were never in the same room, never held the same conversation, never touched hands, but connected across time and grief and the particular loneliness of being watched by everyone and seen by no one. One learned to transform her visibility into a weapon for the invisible. The other watched and learned and did the same thing in different years, different countries, different struggles, the same essential act. Audrey Hepburn died in January 1993. She was 63 years old. She spent her final years not on red carpets, but on dirt floors. Not accepting applause, but holding children who had nothing. She did not do it for her image. She did it because she understood in the deepest part of herself that surviving has a cost, that being saved creates a debt, that the only way to pay it is to turn around and save someone else. Diana understood this too, eventually, because someone left a trail. That is the legacy, not the films, not the fashion, not the fairy tale, the trail. The documented evidence that it is possible to be the thing they made you and still be yourself. The proof that the performance and the person are not the same thing. The map that says, here is the way out. Here is how you find the real thing inside the impossible thing. Here is how you survive being a symbol without losing the human being you actually are. Audrey left that trail. Diana followed it, and somewhere in the distance between them, in the space between a woman who found herself in the feeding camps of Somalia in 1992 and a woman who found herself in the minefields of Angola in 1997, is the proof that grace is not performed, that it cannot be taught or assigned or constructed by a studio or a palace or a press machine. Grace is what remains when everything else falls away, when the cameras are still there, but you have stopped performing for them, when the whole world is watching, but you are looking at one person who needs you, when the image they built around you has become so heavy you can no longer carry it, and you set it down, finally, and discover that underneath it you were always the thing they were claiming you were. Not because they made you that way, because you survived long enough to find it for yourself. That is Audrey Hepburn. That is Princess Diana. That is the line between them. Invisible, unbroken, still there. Every week, one moment from Audrey Hepburn's life. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.